Coming up on the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, we break down these starts, sits, streamers, everything you need to know for matchups in Week 5 using the latest tools over on Razzball.com. Join for this, all this and more starting right now on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. All right, folks, it's Wednesday. It's hump day. I don't know where I was going to go with that next, but I have Derek here. I shouldn't use the word hump and then introduce Derek at the same time, but I just did, and that's right. It's Derek Favret. You can follow him at Derek_Favret on Twitter. What's going on, Derek?
You know, it's Week 5, Bobby. We know each other well enough. It's all good. Don't worry.
All right, cool, man. Honestly, you know what? I'm going. That just made my day. I now know I can say those things. Only I can get away with it once in a while. If I start abusing that, it's going to be a problem. Yeah. All right. Today we're going to be breaking down the matchup takeaways from the first quarter of the NFL season. Well, shouldn't say first quarter, but the first 4 weeks of the NFL season, how it's going to impact Week 5. So we have some key takeaways from the first quarter of the season, and we're going to talk about some of our latest tools over on Razzball.com to help us validate whether or not these trends will continue in Week 5. Before we jump into all that, I want to make sure you follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com and get all the information you need to win your fantasy leagues. Now, Derek, before we dive into our matchup takeaways heading into Week 5, can you kind of give us a quick vibe of how the first 4 weeks of the season has gone? Any big surprises for you so far?
Yeah, well, you know, if you're able to navigate all the injuries, then you're probably in really good shape. You know, if you've lost, or, you know, you had the first draft pick and you took CMC and you're still waiting for that to pan out, you're probably not very happy right now. But, you know, generally there's injuries everywhere. But if you're able to navigate those, then, you know, again, you're probably sitting 3-1, maybe 4-0 in your league. And overall, we're getting into the bye weeks and things can tend to shake up in the bye weeks. So, you know, you want to start looking ahead. You know, even if you don't have any Week 5 bye weeks, you want to look ahead, make sure you have a plan, and then go ahead and ride it out. You should be in good shape.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the times is now we're 4 weeks in, and I think really we starting to get a real vibe of these matchups, of the takeaways. You know, obviously there could be outliers early in the season. One bad game, one bad defensive game makes it look like a defense is terrible against running backs, but in reality it was just a bad game. But the more weeks we get into this, honestly, I can tell you this from last year's experience with the team and all the tools we have on Razzball, I felt we got a lot stronger once the season really hit its stride because these tools really get sharper and sharper as we get deeper into the season. So I'm really excited to see, you know, obviously some of these takeaways we're going to break down today, but overall, just follow us across the board because honestly, I'm on Twitter. I'm going to have so many more matchup takeaways you're going to need to know throughout the next few days. We're really excited to break all those down. And, of course, make sure you check out all the guys' articles. We have the wins versus losses, the home versus aways. We have the starts of the week, the streamers and stashes, Derek's DFS breakdowns. We have a bunch of stuff on Razzball every single day coming out that really breaks down these tools and gives you kind of like nice additional, you know, flag plants for the week or players to fade. So we really do enjoy that. But today's episode is Week 5, 6 streamers, flexes. Oh my. All right. I was kind of going for a Wizard of Oz thing. I don't know. I'm just going to see how it goes. I'm feeling it right now. It's all good. We're going to talk about some key takeaways from when I was diving into the numbers for the first quarter of the season. And Derek's going to help me kind of talk through whether or not these trends and matchups will continue in Week 5. All right. The first one we're going to talk about today is the Thursday night football game, which, of course, is the Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers going up against the Falcons. And one of the key trends we've noticed for the first quarter of the season is you should sit your quarterbacks against the Falcons. Look at Justin Fields, who, by the way, after the first week, we wouldn't have thought he's been that good, but he's been that good over the last 2 weeks. He was QB 22 against the Falcons. Jalen Hurts was QB2 on the week. We had 14.5 fantasy points on the ground, so it wasn't through the air. Patrick Mahomes, QB16. Derek Carr, QB25. So the question for you, Derek, is based on what you're seeing, should we be looking to fade Baker Mayfield in Week 5?
Yeah, so if you go to our defensive slot versus wide tool, and that was my first stop here, you'll find that the Falcons are generally about NFL average in total points to wide receivers, and they're relatively evenly split between slot versus wide, a little bit little bit tilted towards the slot receivers, but generally pretty equal. But against quarterbacks, they're allowing about 200 yards per game passing, almost a touchdown per game, just a little under, but they're also getting just a little under one interception per game. So they are been pretty good against quarterbacks. But if you look at Baker, on the other hand, he's averaging about 250 per game with a pair of touchdowns and a half interception. But he's also doing it a little bit out on the ground as well. Averaging about 3 rushes per game and a half a touchdown, which is, for him, it's about 25 fantasy points per game. One other note to note on Baker, he is on the road at Atlanta. So our home versus road tool shows that he's generally about the same home versus road. So there's really not much of a, road deficit or a home field advantage here for Baker. He's pretty much equal. Last year at Atlanta, he had a pretty good game, 144, 2 touchdowns, not his best, but pretty good. But then week 7 earlier this season versus Atlanta, it was 275 and a touchdown. So to me, taking all of this into account, I see a little bit of a dip in Baker this week. I'm starting him. I've got him actually in one of my leagues. I'm going to start him. I'm not expecting the 25 fantasy points per game that he's averaging, but I'm expecting about 225, a touchdown and a half on average, and a few rushing yards thrown in for about 20 to 21 fantasy points. So I'm starting him. I feel pretty good about it, but I am tempering my expectations just a little bit because the Falcons defense has been pretty tough.
Yeah, I think his upside is just kind of capped, and Baker does kind of flash a little bit with his legs from time to time. He's not like a complete statue back there, but he was QB 10 and QB 16 the 2 weeks he faced Falcons last year. So that's fine. I mean, you're not going to probably lose your week by starting Baker Mayfield on Thursday night. The Falcons are down a few key linebackers as well in this game, so that's notable as well. They beat up in the slot, and that's where Chris Godwin lives, and Chris Godwin's playing on a different level this year. So, but I guess the question though for you is really I'm okay starting Baker, but if I need juice in my lineup, guys like Justin Fields playing against the Cowboys in a game where the Cowboys will be at home. They'll be at home this week, right? The Cowboys are home?
Cowboys are on the road in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, playing at home against the Cowboys. So I don't know. Yeah. Maybe Dak won't be as explosive on the road. No Brandon Cooks. I know everyone's stressed out about that one. But at the same time, I think that there is probably more juice if you're looking for upside, but I think he's probably right around QB 15 this week. Yeah, I'm not overly excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the way you put it is he's capped. We every now and then we see a Baker game where he throws for 350 and 3 touchdowns, 2 to Evans and someone else. But this doesn't feel like that's one of those weeks. But, generally he should be okay. Quarterback 15 makes sense. If you're, deciding between someone like him and, CJ Stroud against Buffalo or even Jaden Daniels against Cleveland, I could see that, you have a decision there. Do you go for what should be a better floor versus the upside and some of those other ones? That might be a hard decision to make, especially him playing on Thursday night. They were all playing on Sunday. You'd have a couple extra days to kind of make that decision.
Yeah, I would probably look at guys like Geno at home against the Giants. I know Brock Purdy's been kind of a 10-team league guy. He might be kind of available, but Brock Purdy's another player I'd prefer in this game, in his game versus the Cardinals. That could be a fun game as well. So yeah, I think he's streamable, but it's a Thursday night football game. It's a short week. Those games always kind of get ugly sometimes, so yes. I'm going to temper expectations. Let's jump into the second takeaway here, and it's start your running backs against the Carolina Panthers. This one is probably not surprising to anybody at this point. If you watch the show, we kind of talked about this a few times, but the trends continue. They've allowed the second most fantasy points to running backs through week 4 of the season. Kamara, RB6. Dobbins, RB5. Madison top 20 finish, and then Chase Brown RB6 and Zach Moss RB17. The reason why we're bringing it up this week, though, is because DeAndre Swift is finally broke out last week for the Chicago Bears. Now, are you chasing the points this week, Derek, in this matchup, or are you still tempering expectations for DeAndre Swift?
Yeah, ironically, last week about this time, Roschon Johnson was the waiver wire darling, of the week. He was going to have a breakout game, but, we didn't actually see that. We saw that he actually only got about half the snaps and the carries as Swift did, and Swift had a, pretty good game. So, yeah, going against Carolina, where they're giving up about an average 125 yards per game. More importantly, though, they're giving up about 5 to 6 targets to running backs per game, and already a total of 7 total touchdowns. So definitely Swift is going to be on the radar. His home road, in our home road tool, his index is 119, which means he's 19%. He scores 19% more points generally at home versus the road. Chicago is at home this week. They're a 4-point favorite for Carolina. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to start Swift where I have him. Probably a running back 2, expectation. Hopefully I've got someone better there. But, yeah, he's a solid running back 2 this week.
The other thing you brought up, too, is the receptions for the Panthers and what they allow. I mean, this season they're kind of they're not actually bad in the passing game for running backs. It's really they get crushed on the ground. I mean, they have allowed over 500 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns this season, but they only have allowed 18 receptions, which is like middle of the pack for running backs specifically. That being said, Swift's coming off a 7 reception, 70-yard game, and he also looked good on the ground. There was a team meeting last week with Shane Waldron. It's like, hey man, you got to get your act together and get more aggressive. And then sure enough, for whatever reason, that just meant give the ball to DeAndre Swift. I can't say why, but hey, forget DJ Moore and Rome Odunze and Keenan Allen, and let's give the ball to DeAndre Swift. I think if you have DeAndre Swift, he's probably going to be a top 24 running back, especially with the 4 bye weeks. 4 teams on bye this weekend. Some good players there as well. So I'm okay with starting DeAndre Swift, especially if you're missing like Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, for example.
Yeah, I'm definitely not chasing 160 plus total yards last week, but he should definitely be solid.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, right? Like, we don't want to chase the points, but when the data suggests that it's just a good matchup, it's like, all right, I'm not chasing the points, I'm chasing the matchup. Carolina's a good matchup, and the Bears are at home. So, like, they're just coming off a really good home game. So, maybe there's something to it. Maybe Caleb feels a little bit better at home. I honestly, like, if you can't start DeAndre Swift with confidence after the performance he just had against the Carolina Panthers, then you should just trade him right now. Go try to trade him. Maybe that's not a terrible idea. And sell the guy on the Carolina matchup this week. All right, let's jump down to the third one here. It's the same exact game because, that's what we do around here. Keep it synergized. We have the Chicago Bears, who have struggled against running backs. Now, they only given up the 10th most fantasy points to running backs, but you have to remember one of those weeks was Joe Mixon, who got hurt mid-game. If you look at the other games, they've allowed a top 12 running back in all 3 games. Tony Pollard, RB12, Jonathan Taylor, RB5, Kyron Williams, RB10. This week they get a red hot, and honestly, the fact that it's week 5, and I'm saying this, a red hot Chuba Hubbard. Is Chuba a guy that you want in your lineups this week, Derek?
Yeah, it definitely is going to be, like you said, the Bears are about the bottom third in the league in running backs, about 100 yards per game, and also some receptions as well. Chuba Hubbard's had 2 opponents for the last 2 weeks, roughly the same level of defense versus running backs. So this is a very I think you could bring forward, the last 2 weeks, especially of his production, and estimate something in the neighborhood. Again, I'll go back to our home versus road tool, and he's actually shown to be better on the road, which, like you said, they're in Chicago. So he scores about 6% better on the road than he does at home. And, when you go to the timeshare and the target share with Miles Sanders, it's still, 2-to-1. So he's getting 2/3 of the carries still, half and half. The targets are about 50-50, but what really I focus on is the running back rushes for the last 2 games that we were talking about. And it's been 9-2 Chuba over Miles Sanders. So I don't think there's a workload question here. The matchup's pretty good. He is on the road where he tends to do a little bit better. So, yeah, definitely I'm starting Chuba Hubbard again this week.
And I want to apologize. I misspoke. Derrick Henry is not on a bye week, but ironically, the Tennessee Titans are. So Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, J.K. Dobbins, and the Lions RBs are on bye this week. So Derrick Henry owners, do not panic. I just lost my mind for a minute. All right. I actually do have some shares of Chuba, and I'm getting him in my lineups. I mean, since the Andy Dalton switch, I think there's the offense just looks a lot better. And honestly, at this point, too, like Chuba, until Jonathan Brooks comes back and muddies up the waters, he's operating as a clear RB1 in an offense that has turned a corner. So I'm going to get him in my lineups and plus matchups when I can. Let's jump into some comments here. Jamie's joining the show. Jamie, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for jumping on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. If you're watching currently anywhere else, X, Instagram, wherever you're watching the Razzball Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you jump over to YouTube and give us a subscribe. We do our NFL Sunday Live Start Sit Show for 2 hours before kickoff, where we answer every single one of your start sit questions 2 hours before kickoff. We also break down key injuries, weather updates, everything you need to know up until kickoff. So join us every Sunday live, 2 hours on the Razzball Fantasy YouTube channel. We also have Do Your Part, which I love the name, by the way. We're going to try to do our part here, but the problem is you didn't give us the trade. Do your part, and give us the trade, my man, or lady. We don't know, but let us know what the actual trade is. We'll answer that for you. Jamie, Roschon Johnson's a running back for the Bears. So if you don't remember, there was a guy that was on our show a bunch last year who really pumped up Roschon. I don't remember his name, but he loved Roschon. If you want to go reach out to him, he could tell you more about him. Jamie also chimes in here. Swift won't see a 41% target share. Yeah, I don't think so either. Derek, if you have a second, do me a favor. Check out the Rams' defensive targets allowed by position. Let me know if the Rams are a really good matchup for running backs in the passing game. Let me know, because I'm curious if that's something that's a trend we should be looking out for. Epic Fail, always a pleasure having you on. Don't tempt me to keep Roschon. I don't think anybody's tempted you. After the DeAndre Swift solidified his role. And honestly, I thought, even when preseason-wise, I kind of thought Roschon made sense as the Zach Charbonnet, still never say it right, in the Shane Waldron offense, while Swift kind of operated as the Kenneth Walker role. I thought that made a ton of sense, but then Roschon was a healthy scratch for a couple weeks. I don't know what that deal was, but I think that's the two roles that make sense moving forward. So honestly, I don't see much upside for fantasy football for Roschon other than a handcuff to Swift. George, we will get to your George Play 01. We will get to some of your start sit questions at the end of the podcast. We do appreciate you jumping in. All right, let's get to the next one, folks. And we're bringing this up today because one of the top waiver ads heading into week 5 is Zach Ertz. And one of the key trends that we've noticed over the last year or so is that the Cleveland Browns have been elite at shutting down tight ends. And so if you look at their 20th in fantasy points allowed, which doesn't sound too bad, but when you look at the guys who actually face them, Jake Ferguson, tight end 25, Brock Bowers, tight end 23. Honestly, I know the Commanders are white hot right now, but I think Zach Ertz is someone where, yeah, if you want your 4 for 25, 4 for 30, sure, you can play him, but there's probably better options. Derek, what did you find in the tools? Does Zach Ertz make sense as a start this week?
Yeah, so if you go to our defensive target tool, the Browns are allowing almost 6 targets per game to tight ends, almost about 20%. But then you also go to our slot versus wide tool, and although it is geared to wide receivers, but you can kind of equate the slot to tight end play, and they're actually one of the better ones. They're top 10 in points allowed, so you get only 9.2 fantasy points to the slot. So they really have been stifling the middle of the field. As indicated, you mentioned, the matchups for the tight ends in the first few weeks. Jake Ferguson, 3 for 15. Brenton Strange, 3 for 65. Daniel Bellinger, 1 for 17. And Brock Bowers, 2 for 19. So 3 of the 4 didn't even break the 20-yard mark in reception. So for Ertz, he's averaging 4 targets per game. The one thing I give him, though, he's got a 94% catch rate. So if he's throwing the ball, he's making the catch. That's about the only positive that I'm really finding for him. He's averaging about 38 yards per game. Hasn't scored a touchdown yet. Hasn't even had a red zone target yet. So no, for me, Zach Ertz is going to be a pass. If you get 4, maybe 5 fantasy points in the PPR from him, you probably feel lucky. So. Yeah, I'm definitely the tools indicate that you definitely want to sit tight ends versus Browns.
There's some really good streamer matchups this week. Juwan Johnson has the Kansas City Chiefs. You have, I don't know what to think of the tight end situation for the Bengals because Eric All is, he got 4 catches last week, and Mike Gesicki didn't really get much, but he ran more routes. But Gesicki and them have Baltimore, who's really good matchup. Then you have the Jacksonville Jaguars situation with Bretton Strange if Evan Ingram's no-go again. And then you also have Tyler Conklin, who actually is facing the Minnesota Vikings, a revenge game, by the way. So Aaron Rodgers is going to know that. So, but all 4 of those guys, I think I'd rather start this week again than Zach Ertz. But Zach Ertz has kind of earned some he is a streaming tight end any single time he has a good matchup. I think that offense is rolling. He's a very prominent pass catcher in that offense. So I do like Ertz season long. All right. Jumping out to number 5, it's start QBs against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, one of the things that we want to focus on is understanding basically fantasy points matter, but how fantasy points are being delivered. And we talk about this in the slot versus wide tool. And what I mean by that is, just because a fantasy team gives up the most fantasy points to a position like quarterback, you also have to dive into where the fantasy points are coming from. A key nugget like that was with the Falcons. Remember, I talked about Jalen Hurts was the QB2, but he had 14.5 fantasy points on the ground. So if you're not a scrambling quarterback, you're not going to get that advantage against the Falcons, who have been very good at shutting down passing games. Well, that's not the case here. If you look at the Jaguars, they are one of the biggest pass funnel defenses in football. They are actually they're okay against the run. They are horrific against the pass. And by the way, this stems from last year in 23 as well. So looking at the guys, Tua Tagovailoa, statue quarterback, QB8, Deshaun Watson, whatever you want to call him, QB17, Josh Allen, just awesome, QB2. CJ Stroud last week, QB7, well over 300 yards passing. So I guess my question for you, Derek, there could be 2 options. It could be Anthony Richardson or our sweet baby Jesus, Joe Flacco. My question for you is, if Anthony Richardson's active, is he a must start? And if Joe Flacco gets the nod, are you streaming him this week?
Yeah, so if I'm a Colts fan or if I have one or both of these guys on my team, I want Joe Flacco to start this game. It's because of volume. You said, friendly to quarterbacks, and the Jags defense definitely is giving up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Over 1,100 yards already and 7 passing touchdowns already. So going to our defensive targets allowed tool, forced most targets and most of them to wide receivers. So it's all about volume, frankly. If you look at Joe Flacco, even last week, he didn't play the full game, 3/4 of the game or so, 26 attempts in 51 snaps. So he's throwing the ball. I mean, that's what he did last year, and that's why we love him. He's throwing the ball. Anthony Richardson on the other side, he hasn't thrown the ball, 30 attempts twice in the 8 games of his career. I mean, granted, those weren't full games in some cases because of injury, but he's not a volume passer, whereas Joe Flacco is. And you've got the defense that gives up the most points to quarterbacks. You need a volume quarterback this week. And let Richardson get healthy. Let him sit one more week. Play Joe Flacco this week and stream him if you can. You're going to love the outcome.
I don't understand, after watching what Joe Flacco did last year with the Browns, why 32 NFL teams are like, nah, I don't want him. I don't want him to start for us. Like, Joe Flacco's a starting quarterback. Like, just watch every single time this guy steps on a football field. Even with the Jets a few years back, the dude was throwing for 400 yards while Zach Wilson, the Jets were like, well, we got to see what we got in Zach Wilson. They could have easily, by the way, sat Zach Wilson for a season, let him develop behind the scenes, and let Joe Flacco develop the rest of your roster because the dude's throwing for 400 yards in games.
Can you imagine,
I don't understand
the difference in the narrative if he was in Miami as a backup quarterback rather than up there with the Colts?
Wild. But I mean, just look at what he did last week. Look at Downs and Michael Pittman. If you're a Michael Pittman owner or a Josh Downs owner, you're praying that Joe Flacco gets the start here. Anthony Richardson, I don't want to just poop. As of today, he is not a good passer. Like, it's just awful to watch. He can't make the easy throw. He makes the big throws. Alex Pierce deep passes are nice, but he's not making this simple 5-yard out pass. And Joe Flacco, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I don't understand how franchises think it's like winning football games is a bad thing. The Browns went to the freaking playoffs last year because Joe Flacco was he won comeback player of the year after only playing half the games because he was that dominant. Sorry, I'm getting excited. That gets me going like Joe Flacco talk.
Yeah, exactly.
But if he starts to get this is by the way, DFS article from Derek guaranteed Joe Flacco is going to be in that one, folks, because he's going to be a fantastic play this week if he gets the start.
And so will Alex Pierce. You mentioned Alex Pierce. Yeah, that's another name that really popped up on my radar besides Michael Pittman. But Alex Pierce with Joe Flacco at quarterback. I really like that matchup this week for him.
Yeah. I think either way you're going with the Colt. Last year in Jacksonville, Anthony Richardson played well. He had 2 touchdowns, 233 passing yards, 40 yards rushing. That's a solid day. And then Gardner Minshew in the other game had over 300 yards passing. And I like Gardner. He's not a terrible quarterback. I think he'd be a great backup. I don't think he's a starter. He should be with the with the Raiders right now. I mean, they should be flipped. He should have stayed in Indianapolis, and Flacco should be the starter for the Raiders. Devontae Adams right now would be going to the Hall of Fame early. He wouldn't be trying to leave Las Vegas. He'd be doing what do they call that? A residency in Las Vegas if he was with Joe Flacco. I'm there. I got it.
You got it.
But either way, I'm starting one of these guys. I think both of them are slam dunks. I hope Joe Flacco starts just so I can talk about him on Sunday. All right, on the same game, let's flip it over to the other side here and talk about the Indianapolis Colts. And you should start your QBs against the Colts. Now, the Colts one is a little different. They have allowed 117 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground. But if you're just looking at how the games played out last year, Trevor Lawrence played pretty well in both the games that he faced the Colts last year. But if you look at the guys who played well against the Colts, you got C.J. Stroud, QB 11. Malik Willis played okay. I mean, granted, Malik Willis is Malik Willis, QB 25, but it was Kayla Williams, QB 9. Justin Fields, QB 1. My sweet baby Justin Fields. Oh, QB1 last week. Is Trevor Lawrence startable? Is he a top 12 option this week, Derek?
Yeah, so the key thing I pulled out of this actually is looking at his season so far, and his best game was at home. He's had 1 home game this year. This will be his 2nd home game in week 5. And the best home game for him, yardage-wise, was week 2 versus the Browns, who ironically have the 4th best defense versus quarterback. So they have a really stout defense. And at home, Lawrence had his best game of the year throwing the rock. So obviously you want to look at our home versus road tool, and he's about 5% better at home. So that tracks. But the other thing I noticed as well when our win-loss tool, and by the way, the Jags are favored by 3 at home. Lawrence's win-loss index is 143, which means he's almost 50% better as a quarterback in wins, and he's better at home. So he's playing a Colts defense, like you said, bottom 2-3 versus the quarterback. A lot better, a lot more favorable matchup than the last time he was at home versus Cleveland. His home-road splits, win-loss splits, both show that he's better at home. So to me, he is maybe at the end of the top 12, but yeah, he's probably a top 12, top 13 quarterback this week. Maybe he would peak at about 9 or 10, but yeah, 12 or 13 seems about right.
Baker Mayfield or Trevor Lawrence?
I'm probably going to go Baker because I think his floor is stronger. There's upside to both of them, but I think it's just a matter of the floor between the two, and Baker's floor is higher than Lawrence's, but I don't hate either one of them. I would go Baker.
You know what the problem for me is? Like, I almost rather Joe Flacco play because, like, if Flacco's in, I just feel like the flow of by the way, JT is banged up as well. Yep. And so they could lean a little more. If Flacco's in, they could throw a little more. That's better game flow for passing, for time management. Like when you play the Colts, sometimes you have mobile quarterbacks. The game goes quick because the clock's running because they're running with the quarterback. They're running the football a lot. So I actually am going to lean slightly Trevor Lawrence in this one over Baker, but I'll probably eat my crow on that one. All right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say before we get off this, you mentioned Joe Flacco again. So looking at his, I go back to last year, 5 of his 6 games last year, he had over 40 attempts, over 40 passing attempts, and 5 of the 6 games last year. And again, last week in a partial game, he had 26. So yeah. And I mentioned volume, that volume passing, it really, frankly, for either one of these guys, Lawrence or Flacco, assuming it's Flacco. I like the volume passing game. The over-under on this one is currently 46. I'd probably bet the over, to be honest with you.
I like it. All right, let's get to our last takeaway heading into week 5. It's start your running backs against the Raiders. And while we're bringing this one up, folks, it's been a tough sledding for Javonte Williams, but Denver has the Raiders this week. The Raiders going through some turmoil right now with the Davante Adams situation. Are they losing focus? They're losing one of their leaders. Well, the Raiders have allowed the 8th most fantasy points to running backs. J.K. Dobbins, RB4. Derrick Henry, RB13. Chuba Hubbard, RB4. Jerome Ford, RB18. Do you think Javonte Williams has a shot at top 20 numbers this week, Derek?
A shot. I don't feel strongly about it, but there is a shot. And, the reason being, like you mentioned, eighth most fantasy points, targets allowed. They're about league average for running backs. But when you look at the targets, they're giving up the 5th most receptions to running backs. Essentially, 22 receptions to running backs with most. It's almost 100% reception rate to running backs. So Javonte Williams getting about 4 to 5 targets per game. I think that's going to be the difference. He's getting almost 2/3 of the red zone rushing attempts. He's getting over 11% of the red zone targets over the last, and if you're familiar with our touchdown rush and receiving share tool, it's a trend over the last 18 weeks. So it's a rolling 18 weeks. So it's not just this season, but it goes back to last season as well. So he's getting the red zone work. He is better at home, a little better at home. So I'm playing Williams. Top 20, top 25 seems pretty realistic. I'm probably don't have expectations that he's going to get much higher than that, but top 20 seems fair.
I want to buy into the narrative that like the rookie will be more comfortable playing at home. And, the only home game they've played so far, I believe, I'm trying to find now they played, is week 2 against the Steelers.
Pittsburgh, yes.
Yeah. And like the Steelers are a legit defense. And so like it's been 3 away games, 1 home game. Javonte's home game was terrible against the Pittsburgh Steelers.
But fantasy-wise, he had his best scoring game, and that was due to the receptions. His rushing was terrible, but yeah, he added up the receptions. If you're in a PPR league, you love that.
Yeah, it's hard because like he had 3 targets is like last week is kind of like one of those things where it's like if you don't make a play on like if you don't like you get such limited opportunities because they're trying to protect Bo Nix. They're not throwing a bunch. A lot of the targets are going to Courtland Sutton, and then it's spread out through a bunch of other guys. They did lose Tyler Batty, which was getting some work. Saw 2 targets last week, but he's now hurt. So maybe that kicks something back over to Javonte Williams. Jaleel McLaughlin has been kind of a disappointment this season too. The offense as a whole has been kind of tough to watch. But like Javonte is at home against a division rival. And at this point, if you look at the guys who beat the Raiders, they aren't dominant running backs. I mean, J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard, Jerome Ford. Javonte Williams is on par with those guys.
Yeah,
if he can
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say if he can't put up top 20-ish numbers for you this week, like you might as well just drop him because there's no point of having him. If you can't play him in good matchups at home, then what are we talking about here? Like it's just you're never going to be able to trust the guy.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that in the four games they played, 2 of those have been versus top 5 defenses versus running backs, whereas the next 4, if you're looking out a little bit further. None of their next 4 opponents they're either NFL average or lower. So the schedule gets a lot more friendly for Javonte Williams over the next few weeks. If Bo Nix continues to get more comfortable, keep throwing the ball to Courtland Sutton, kind of open it up a little bit, keep the defense honest, and just frankly, against some weaker opponents, Javonte Williams, you might see a different Javonte Williams over the next few weeks. And like you said, that should start this week. If we don't see it this week, then there's definitely cause for concern. But I'm betting that we're going to see, again, like I said, top 20, top 25 makes a lot of sense. I would say top 20.
Yeah, I listen. And by the way, you're right. That the adjusted line yards matchup metric that we have on the back end here says that he has the 6th best. So comparing the first 4 weeks to the next 5 weeks, he has the 6th biggest upgrade amongst running backs. So yes, Javonte, I don't want to say he's a buy yet, but I guess here's a better question for you. Let's say you have a Javonte Williams owner who doesn't care anymore. You're not dropping Javonte, he's a starting running back. But what is a reasonable offer to a Javonte Williams owner that is buying low without buying, that isn't unreasonable?
Yeah. So a name that I'm seeing a lot as a sell, ironically, is Garrett Wilson. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that. So if you are a Garrett Wilson owner, for instance, and you need running back help, you could probably get Javonte Williams as a throw-in. The second player throw in on a deal involving Garrett Wilson. Getting a wide receiver back, that's serviceable. Maybe a wide receiver 2 plus a Javonte Williams. That would probably go a long way to shore up your team. Something like that. If you're willing to take the risk of discarding Garrett Wilson, someone like a Garrett Wilson at this point. I don't necessarily recommend that, but again, that is one of the hot topics I'm seeing out there in the chat rooms and whatnot, that he may be a sell. And if I'm going to entertain something like that, I want someone like a Javonte Williams as the second piece coming back. And I think right now might be the time to do that.
Garrett, do not sell Garrett Wilson. Do not sell him. He had the toughest out wide matchup the first 4 weeks of the season.
Yep.
So if you just look at his opponents, the first 4 weeks, they have been brutal. And by the way, his schedule opens up a little. This is the week, right? This is the Garrett Wilson week, by the way, against Minnesota, one of the better out wide matchups. This is his first elite out wide matchup of the season. Not elite, but good out wide matchup of the season. The average fantasy points allowed out wide for his opponents has been 14, okay? Just to give you an example, the league average is 19. Teams like the Giants, for example, and Malik Neighbors have averaged 23 fantasy points out wide in their opponents. So, yeah, it's been tough. Garrett Wilson's a buy. Please go buy Garrett Wilson right now. I honestly what's funny? I haven't made offers because I always try to think of ways to make it fair. But I've looked at every one of the Garrett Wilson teams I don't have him on, and I'm always looking at the teams, and I'm like, how can I get him And I'm like kind of like flirting, but I'm like too nervous to approach. Like I don't want to be a douchebag and like, hey, here's my really shitty wide receiver 4. Take him for Garrett Wilson. But
it sounds like you're the guy at the homecoming dance, going up to ask the girl to dance.
Right? Yeah. I'm a little nervous, but I got to build up the courage. Please go buy Garrett Wilson. You're going to be very happy with him shortly. But I think the other, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, like kind of the next 5-week variants, like I guess wide receiver wise, maybe like Khalil Shakir, could that get it done? I don't know if like Rashid Shaheed type wide receiver, could that get it done?
Yeah.
Would you trade one of those guys?
One of the Texans receivers would certainly get it done.
For Javonte?
Yeah.
You're going to trade, so not Nico, though, you mean, right?
No,
like,
not Nico.
You mean Tank Dell,
yes.
Stephon Diggs. Okay,
exactly.
I almost had a heart attack.
Exactly. No, I'm not trading Nico Collins, but someone like, Diggs or certainly Tank Dell, I think that would, he was out last week, but, he'll be back and he still has value in his name. That would be, someone who needs wide receiver help. That would be maybe an offer, a name that could probably peel away Javonte Williams.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. It's always tough because RBs are just it's hard to find any starting valuable RB in general. So, I would be okay with a guy like Shaheed for Javonte if you need RB help. I think that makes some sense. The Saints have a tougher road ahead for wide receivers. So we'll
George Pickens. What about George Pickens for Javonte? Is that too much?
I'm keeping Pickens.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the fact that like it's just this the whole offense is not. They're like trying to protect Bo Nix so much that like, and Nix uses his legs. And by the way, it's an underrated aspect of this where running backs are impacted by mobile quarterbacks. And it impacts them a lot in the passing game. I know Javonte has gotten a few catches in here and there, and he had some good games. But it's very inconsistent, and the offensive line has not looked great. Like they haven't run the ball well at all. So I think he's going to be better. But here's the other thing about all these tools. I know we're like 40 minutes in, and I think we basically don't care anymore about time. Sorry, me and Derek's Wednesday show have just gone off the rails. So I don't care. It's so much fun. But here's the thing about these tools. And I love our tools. I love it all. I'm all about the numbers. I really am. But we have to be understanding of like what we're talking about here. Like what I mean by like the variance. So like the first 4 weeks, Javon, let's say just for an example, his next 5 weeks versus the next previous 4 weeks might be 10% better in his matchup, right? But if you're averaging 8 fantasy points, 10% better is essentially 9 fantasy points. It's not like all of a sudden, it's like a 50% swing where he's averaging 8. Now he jumps to 12. But the other thing is these matchups are better. So like he should start Bo Nix in theory should start getting a little more comfortable, should start getting a little better. But I think this is the other thing with the Broncos situation was they played a lot of away games early on. That's tough for a rookie who might have been overmatched in general, but then he has to go on the road 3 out of 4 weeks. That's why I think Javonte is a buy, but like at a reasonable cost. And I don't know. I sometimes don't know what that means. Like, I don't know if like I don't even know if Khalil Shakir gets it done.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know if it does either.
Shakir's been better, but like if I'm a Javonte Williams owner, I'd just be like, I'd rather just keep Javonte. If you're not going to give me, a wide receiver 3 consistently, maybe Shaheed is the guy. I don't know, but not every team has Shaheed, right? So you can't.
With players like Jonathan Thomas, out this week is going to make anyone that has any kind of running back depth skittish. So you're probably going to have to. I mean, you're not going to buy him super low, but you're going to have to overpay maybe a little bit, but certainly not, what a running back 1 would be. So you could still get him at I think at a decent price.
The other thing too, I would like to just point out is like I don't think it's going to be hard to trade running back for running back. I always get confused by leagues when they like one team some team values another running back more than the other. That's a very rare situation. Like trading Jerome Ford for Javonte Williams might make sense, but like I don't really know how that helps. I guess it's going to be matchup based. I think both these guys have proven they're matchup based. So
I mean, if
that,
you're sitting on Chubb, coming back, on your IR spot, and you want to get Ford just to have that, that running back room. Okay, maybe, but otherwise, it's really just shuffling deck chairs to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. All right, let's get to some questions here before we close the show. We had George play start 1 RB, 2 wide receivers, and a flex non-PPR. George, come on. Let's get a half in there. Let's get half PPR. I want you to put out a league vote next year and say, hey, guys, we need to do half PPR just to spice things up a little bit. You'll thank us later. We got Bucky Irving, Javonte, ironically, Tank Bigsby, Brian Thomas, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, JSN, and Keon Coleman. What's your thoughts here, Derek?
Well, even though it's a non-PPR, I'm still going to lean towards the wide receivers for the flex spot, so the third best wide receiver. I'm going to play Brian Thomas. I'm going to play DJ Moore, and probably play JSN in the flex. And then I'll go with I'll probably go with Javonte. Just after our talk, I'll go with Javonte as the running back. So Javonte, Thomas, DJ Moore, and JSN.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go, man. JSN's been a little disappointing for me, to be honest with you. Last week he had 8 catches, but it was like on 50 yards. Fine for PPR, I guess. But by the way, Brian Thomas Jr., I am in love. I honestly got him on waivers in a shallow league because he really wasn't performing, and I picked him up, and I think he's a buy. A week before they talked about how they have to get him the ball more. His out wide schedule opens up. I think he's one of the biggest buys. He's a must start against the Colts this week. I love him. I'm gonna go DJ Moore in a revenge game against Carolina. Come on, let's get it done all day there. Amari Cooper is playing Washington. Washington is probably one of the best overall matchups for wide receivers. So I think I'm going to go Cooper, DJ Moore, Brian Thomas.
I don't hate that.
And then running back wise, God, we were just talking him up. Like Tank Bigsby he's looked good.
He's coming on, yeah.
Yeah, but I just don't know if he's going to overtake Travis Etienne. Right. So you're banking on a guy getting 8 carries to bust one long one or score a touchdown. I've never been that kind of guy. I want the touches. So give me Javonte in a better matchup. We just talked about the matchup, right? So this is the week. Trust Javonte. And so I'm going to go Javonte.
And before you go away from that, we were just talking about obtaining players moving forward, and Bigsby is a good name, especially for the bye weeks coming up. If you need a fill-in running back for the bye weeks, Bigsby is a name that I would keep on my radar for that reason. For the very reason you say, he's a great fill-in.
Do you think there's a shot that Bucky Irving overtakes White?
I do, absolutely. He's shown really well. Certainly in the first and second down. White is really falling into that pass catcher role out of the backfield, and he does it well. We saw it last year. He was probably a league winner for a lot of folks last year in PPR leagues. But Bucky Irvin is by far the better runner. So yeah, I definitely see that he will probably have a majority of the carries. Within the next few weeks, we're going to see that consistently, I think.
In my adjusted line yards matchup metric, the number one matchup this week is the Jags. So oh no, Jesus, I'm gonna stick with Javonte, but man, I think Bigsby and Irving are kind of very similar in the sense that they both look better as pure runners, but the offense they're 1Bs and the other guy gets the passing game work.
Yeah.
So that's a tough proposition every week. So you got to hope for either a blowout where they get a bunch of work or, something, or they find the end zone.
But yeah, both of those guys are definitely targets for acquiring if you don't have them already. They're definitely targets.
All right, let's shift out to Tyler. Tyler Sperry. Tyler, by the way, good to see you again. Honestly, good to see you again. You got Zach Chabanate, Jerome Ford. Would you drop one of those guys for Trey Sermon? Honestly, if you need a spot start for this week, I'm okay. I'm not a Zach Charbonnet guy unless I have Kenneth Walker. I don't care about him. Once Walker's back, Charbonnet is kind of relatively useless. But yeah, what's your thoughts, Derek? Sorry, I just knocked my mouse over.
Yeah, so short term, if you need Sermon, I don't mind, the pickup, but just know that he has a shelf life, and when Tom he comes back, or Jonathan Taylor comes back, then he's useless to you. So if you need it for this week, make the move, because it's all about winning. You need to win this week, and then do it, and then go make your plan moving forward. But if you're in a good position and you're just looking to make a depth move, then no, I'm sticking with both Charbonnet and Ford. But if you need Sermon this week, go ahead and get him.
Yeah, I mean, Zach Charbonnet had 2 carries last week when Kenneth Walker came back. Kenneth Walker's been a little injury prone, but so has Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's about to miss game, potentially with a mild high ankle sprain or whatever that is. But he's basically missed time the last few years. Look at Zach Moss. This offense is built for the running back position. Moss looked great last year in it. So, I actually would prefer – it depends too. Unless I have Walker, I don't think I have any connection to Zach Charbonnet. I mean, honestly – If no one's picking up Sermon right now, I would reach out to the Kenneth Walker owner and just be like, hey, man, like, do you have any interest in your handcuff before I just drop him, and see maybe if you can pluck a player off his bench to see if that's a deal. But if I need a spot start this week, it's gonna be Trey Sermon if Jonathan Taylor is definitely out. All right, Captain Joking. Is it Joking or Joe King? Oh, Captain King. Joe King. Jesus. All right, folks. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I moved this weekend. I'm out of my mind. All right. Huge fan of the show. Right back in it. Love every second of it. Already a sub. Even better. Captain. That's why he's the captain, folks. He knows what he's doing. If Javonte goes to the Jets, is he a top 5 wide receiver rest of season? Back with Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett. He's got Garrett Wilson to compete with targets, but do you think he could be a top 5 wide receiver back with Aaron Rodgers? What's your thoughts?
I say no. I say top 10 is more realistic. I'm not top 5, and it's really not because of him, but it's because of his quarterback. I'm not on the Aaron Rodgers bus. I'm just not. And I mean, he's fine. He's having decent games. He probably have a decent game this week too. But you put Devontae on that team with Garrett Wilson, and I mean, you still have Breece Hall there. I mean, there's still a lot to share the football with. And, I don't think that, you're going to just turn back the dial 3-4 years and see what you had, in Green Bay with those two. They'll be fine, but no, it doesn't instantly make him a top 5 receiver for me.
Yeah. The Titans, 49ers, the Broncos, and the Patriots are his first matchup. None of those teams are in the top half of the NFL in fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. He's had a really tough, brutal schedule to start the year. This is going to be the first game this season that Aaron Rodgers faces a top 10 or even a top 16 defense in fantasy points allowed to the position. So I think the MVP Aaron Rodgers is not going to be a thing. I don't think he's good enough to overcome these really tough matchups. By the way, the offense hasn't like when Aaron Rodgers was in Green Bay, things were clicking on a different level. That's not the case with the Jets. Whether it's offensive line, whether it's, the players and, Rodgers' chemistry, but him going to the Jets gives him a much better chance at being a top 10 receiver rest of season than what's going on currently with the Raiders. I mean, the good news is that he'll be featured with the Raiders, but the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, there'll be a chemistry there that I think he could never have with Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell. So I think top 10, you're right. Top 10 to 12 makes sense. I think Aaron Rodgers is still good enough to support 2 top 12 wide receivers, but it's going to be tough. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is good enough to support 2 top 12 receivers in bad matchups like he could have 5 years ago. So Garrett Wilson will be a thorn in the side. I think top 5 is out of the question.
Yeah, and obviously, they have that chemistry, and chemistry is a big thing. I mean, look at Alan Lazard right now with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's actually a viable fantasy player, with the matchup with Rodgers, and Mike Williams is starting to come on. So, it sounds great to put those 2 back together, but I don't see that as, the fit that's going to take the Jets to the Super Bowl or just make Rodgers an MVP candidate. That's not what they need. They've got other needs that they, if they really want to be a good football team challenging for the Lombardi Trophy, Devontae Adams is not what they need, in my opinion. So, but again, we worry about fantasy. We don't really care about, unless you're a Jets fan, you're not really caring about, the real life struggles that they are. But, it'll obviously give him a boost, like you said, and I'm okay top 10, but that's probably about it.
Yeah. So just Jamie chimed in a little bit about Sermon looking good last week. Yeah, I think a lot of times, when these guys have limited touches, it's hard to tell. I think we've seen in the last few years with Zach Moss and also Jonathan Taylor, of course, this offense has been really good for ground games. I don't know enough about Trey Sermon to say that Trey Sermon is going to be good. We don't know. Honestly, but he earned the number 2 spot. There's been a lot of good. This guy was, by the way, drafted by the 49ers. He was supposed to be the next great running back for Kyle Shanahan, but then he got cut. Then he looked okay and earned some ropes with the Eagles, and that's why he ended up with the Colts and Shane Steichen. So, I think it's one of those things with 4 good running backs on bye this week that Sermon, if he does get the start, the other problem is the Jags they are good against ground games. Like, how you beat the Jags is through the air. So the question is, if Joe Flacco's the quarterback, maybe he gets a couple more targets. But if it's Anthony Richardson, I don't really see how many targets Trey Sermon's going to get in a tough ground game matchup. So I don't think he's a lock to start. But teams are going to be desperate. So I think he's probably an RB3 maybe at most. Personally, if it's Flacco, maybe he gets a slight bump. By the way, Tyler, they don't answer questions. You cannot say this about our show. We spend 2 hours every Sunday answering questions. And by the way, I got to tell you too, man, we apologize. We understand you guys got things to do. We want to answer your questions. We typically, in the middle of the week, we answer your questions at the end of the show. So we apologize that it takes a little time. We want to just get through some of the data. We'll get to your questions at the end of the show. We do apologize and appreciate you being on. But if you need your questions right away, join us on Sunday, man. We get to the questions, every single question. If you ever become a super chatter, donate to the show. We get to your question right away. We would appreciate that as well. So, there you go. Jamie's got her back. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you as always. All right. Evan Hall could see more work if Taylor is out since he's a more pass catcher than Sermon. By the way, the way you beat the Jags with running backs is with passing game. And so we just brought that up. So that could make more sense in a PPR format, that Hall versus Sermon. So I don't love Sermon that much either. How many drinks would it take you to start both Javonte and Roschon? How many drinks? I actually would just say 0. Because I wouldn't even start drinking because it's not going to happen. All right. I'm not going to do it. You can't get me just knowing that this is an option. I will stop drinking. I'm not going to drink anymore because I don't want to risk starting Roschon and Javonte. What about you, Derek?
Yeah, I would say if I even rostered both of them, that tells me I need to stop drinking. So the think that I have to start both of them, I like them both fine, but the thought of having to start both of them, that means, you're in some dire straits. Frankly, Jamie agrees about Garrett Wilson, man. Appreciate that. Love it. Epic fail for tight ends. Who would you start this week? Kraft, Firemuth, likely. And who would you want to keep rest of season? Derek, what's your thoughts here? Yeah, of those 3, I mean, Isaiah likely has the most talent. What is going on with Mark Andrews? I mean, it's baffling to see.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
It's terrible.
Oh.
sure hand as he's always been. And I mean, he could hit in the hands and it just went, right through, right to the ground. So, yeah, I think there's an opportunity for likely, rest of season, especially if Mark Andrews doesn't figure it out. I mean, he's going to start being a decoy, and they're going to have to look towards likely. He's shown that he can do it already this year, and we knew that coming in. But right now, Freiermuth is the guy that of these three that I'm looking for right now to give me some stability at essentially a wasteland of tight ends for fantasy. Freiermuth has been okay. So of these three, I'm probably looking at Freiermuth right now, but I'm keeping an eye on likely rest of season. I think there's some value to be had there.
Tucker Kraft is my guy. I got him every single league I picked him up I could. I missed him out. Actually, the only league I did not get him in was this league I share with Ben Wasley. Ben got outbid me for him. I was so pissed, and then I got to face Ben this week. But listen, Tucker Kraft is the undisputed tight end one for the Packers. If you look at the snap percentages, the last two games that he played with Jordan Love, he was on the field about 90% of the snaps. He looked awesome last week, and he gets an awesome matchup against the Rams. The Rams rushing defense actually turned a little bit of a corner last week, but their pass defense is still terrible. Listen, Jordan Love has been a rocket ship. By the way, it's been delayed. If you can go get Jordan Love and all his pass catchers, please go get him, because I'm telling you now, like, Jordan Love is the real deal. Tucker Kraft is going to win you your fantasy league. This is guy, I'm telling you, he is my guy. This is the guy I want to get. I picked him up everywhere. I have Dalton Kincaid, and I picked up Kraft, put him on my bench. I'm trying to trade Kincaid because I believe Kraft is going to be special the second half of the year. So I'm all in on this call for Tucker Kraft. All right. James Hernandez. Sorry, I'm just so used to saying Jamie at this. James Hernandez. Pick 3, Cooper, Kirk, Wan'Dale, Pittman, Wicks. Let's do that one first. We got to pick 3. So Christian Kirk's got the Indianapolis Colts. By the way, I will say this. Kenny Moore, their top slot guy and top cornerback, missed last week. If he's out again, Kirk gets a nice bump in that matchup. Cooper has a slam dunk matchup against the Commanders. Wan'Dale Robinson and the Giants are on the road against the Seattle Seahawks. And then Michael Pittman, hopefully with Joe Flacco, gets the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Dontavian Wicks with Christian Watson expected to be out. I believe the Packers are facing the Rams this week. So what's your thoughts here, Derek?
Yeah, so definitely Cooper and Pittman. Again, Pittman, especially if Joe Flacco is playing, I think those two are slam dunk. After that, I don't mind any of those three. I'm not sure you can really go wrong. We talked about the Jacksonville situation, and, we like Trevor Lawrence okay this week. So, Christian Kirk should be okay. Wan'Dale Robinson, he's not getting the air yards. He's getting the target. So if you're a PPR, which you are, full PPR, I don't hate Wan'Dale Robinson. And then, of course, Wicks against a very depleted Rams defense, is a good play as well. So I don't think you can go wrong after Cooper and Pittman. I don't think any of these three are going to be all that they're separate all that much from the other two. So start Cooper and Pittman, and then whichever the third one you like better. What do you think, Bobby?
So James, I'm going to tell you this. I really, really want you to join us on Sunday because there's a couple of moving parts here. The Joe Flacco versus Anthony Richardson thing will definitely sway me one way or another. Also, Kenny Moore potentially being out again for the Colts might sway me towards Christian Kirk. If I'm picking today, let's assume Anthony Richardson starts, Kenny Moore is active. I like Cooper in his matchup. And by the way, Wicks, I don't know what it is about the Packers and Wicks, but they are this guy, all he does is dominate when he's on the field, but they're like, we're going to just keep you down, kid, until, other guys get hurt. He's got an insane matchup. Listen, I'm putting Wicks right into my lineups against the Rams. Cooper would be in as well. And honestly, I think right now I'm leaning Pittman against Jacksonville, but if Richardson plays, I might kick myself over to Christian Kirk. So that's kind of my caveat here. And the other one is Burrow. This week, Cincinnati has got a division matchup against the Ravens. And then, of course, Justin Fields playing against a very banged-up Dallas Cowboys defense coming off his QB1 performance. What's your thoughts here, Derek?
Yeah, for me, it's going to be Burrow. He's coming on. We've seen that after a slow start. He's coming on. He's got the weapons there. T. Higgins is back. I love Mike Gesicki in that offense. He's another one of my favorites. So, yeah, I don't hate Fields, but if you've got Joe Burrow, you drafted him for a reason. It's still week 5, and you drafted him as your QB1. Play him.
I want to just I want to look at quickly what Burrow's done against the Ravens. It just seems like the Ravens right now. Is it like the Cowboys will be on the road? Dak's on the road. Road Dak, by the way, if you check out the home versus away splits, he's not the same player. He's okay. Like if you look at his numbers, like for example, against the Giants, he was fine. But being on the road against Pittsburgh's a little bit different. I don't know if Dak and the Cowboys are going to put up big-time numbers on the road. So I don't think Justin Fields and them are going to necessarily need to put up major points. But the Cowboys are really banged up. Micah Parsons, Dexter Lawrence are out. So I think I want to look quickly at Joe Burrow versus the Ravens because it's one of those things sometimes when you face your division rival, like you just either they have your number or sometimes you have their number. So I just want to take a look at this really quick before I answer.
Last year, 222-2 at home versus the Ravens.
Yeah, but 2023. I have 2 games last year, weeks 2 and weeks 11. He had 15 fantasy points and 8 fantasy points. Then he had 11-17. So he hasn't had a major game since 2021. Man.
That was a different Baltimore defense as well.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I'm okay. Go if it's 6 point per passing touchdown, go Burrow. If it's 4 point, I'm okay with Fields. I think I think Fields is playing. He's leveling up a little bit, but I don't love it. I'm gonna go Burrow too. Sorry, I know that's a rough answer, but like when when you're not prepared for like a specific player, I'm like I need to know like some background here. So at least you got to see the mind spinning a little bit. We're an hour deep here too, folks. So let's keep it moving. Tyler, by the way, this is what we love about our crowd here. And by the way, I'm sorry, Tyler. I took it a little personally, and I apologize too. But this is why it's all love, man. It's all love. We're going to get to your questions. We love you being on. I'm sorry. Thank you for joining our show. See, look at that. Look at that. We're all friends. I love every second of it. All right. Let's see. Traded Sermon and Mostert for Jamar Chase in a rookie draft. That's how highly people thought of Sermon as a rookie. Yeah, remember the San Francisco. By the way, that's one of my biggest rants of all time is the San Francisco 49er beat writers that offseason never said a word about Elijah Mitchell being the RB1. And sure enough, Sermon after week 1 was no longer the starter. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. But anyway, I digress. Just traded away Kraft straight up for Andrews today in Dynasty.
Yeah, I like that.
I don't know, Jamie. I don't know, man. You traded away Kraft to get Andrews. I don't know, Jamie.
I took it the other way. Oh, yeah, you're right. In a dynasty.
We love you. We love you, Jamie. We love you. Listen, we wish you nothing but the best.
I'd rather have Kraft in a dynasty than Andrews. Yeah.
How much did I bid for Kraft? I think it was about 10, probably just around 10% of my budget. In it was $100 Fab League. I think I bet it like $11. Honestly, I started at $7, and then like every hour on the hour, I'm like, I really want him, so I kept giving another $1, and I finished at 11. I got him. Just over 10% of my Fab. I went all in. Sorry, I got a little overexcited. Probably could have got him for less. I'll have to double check, but epic fail. Good question. Aiden, thank you for joining. Should I trade Breece Hall for Kyren Williams? Straight up, Derek.
That's an interesting question. I think the first reaction is no. We're only 4 weeks in, and he was, if not the first running back off the board, the second. And how much that's changed in 4 weeks. But then you look at it. I mean, he doesn't have more than 62 yards rushing in any game this year, and you look down the schedule, and he's got some tough matchups ahead of him too. So I don't hate it, honestly. I think just name value alone, you can probably get more than Kyren Williams. So maybe get 2 for 2 that way, and just upgrade a little bit somewhere else. Because I think 1 for 1, if you offer that trade, I think the Kyren Williams owner is probably going to accept it pretty quickly. I would think. So I think there's some opportunity to negotiate and maybe upgrade somewhere else as well if you're going to give up Breece Hall.
I think Braylon Allen has been a little more effective and a little more involved than we probably thought. And so, it's not like the Jets have had a really tough early season run game schedule. Their pass game schedule has been atrocious. Their run game schedule actually has not been bad. Braylon Allen being involved on top of that, my thought process with Breece Hall is that I think you could probably upgrade. You could probably slightly downgrade at running back in theory at name value and probably get yourself a flex out of that. I think a good example of that would be like James Conner and a wide receiver 2 you could probably get those 2 players and upgrade a flex. So I would be interested in your whole roster because let's see. He also offered Garrett Wilson, but he's not scoring any points. Yeah, I don't think you can get Kyren and Garrett Wilson for Breece Hall, but I want Garrett Wilson on my roster. I don't think I'm trading Breece Hall for him, but just to finish my thought, I think what I'm saying is like I honestly Breece Hall. I think straight up for Kyren, I think you're probably going to get a lot of like you said earlier, Derek, moving chairs a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's going to be weeks where Breece Hall has better weeks. Because Breece Hall, I think the Jets offense is going to. By the way, when Aaron Rodgers gets softer matchups, I think it's going to help the entire offense as a whole, and Breece Hall is going to also benefit from a better matchup. Like when Aaron Rodgers is flowing against a better matchup, I think Breece Hall plays better. But I think I would want to explore a 2 for 1 where I trade Breece Hall to maybe downgrade at running back to a guy like Connor and maybe try to pick up a wide receiver like T. Higgins, for example, or something along those lines. Maybe like a 2 for 1. What's your thoughts on that, Derek?
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of where I was thinking as well. Use if you're going to consider trading Breece Hall, use that to either get what you consider an equivalent. If you think Kyren Williams is relatively equivalent right now, then go ahead and do that. But Breece Hall has more value, probably to the other owner. So you deserve to get a little bit more back. And whether it's a 2 for 1 or a 2 for 2, where that second player is better than the one that you're adding to the Breece Hall side. So I'm not opposed to moving him if it makes your team better. And if you can get 2 players back that makes your team better than the one you have, frankly, with Breece Hall, then I'm okay with that. You don't have to win the trade. You want to make your team better.
What I'm thinking? Like, I don't know if you get Garrett Wilson. I don't know. I would be curious. Aiden, tell us, give us the full rundown. And honestly, if you run out of time here, if you're still not even here, we don't even know.
He's got
come back on. Yeah. Breece Hall, Jefferson, Olave, Devonta Smith. So you got stacked wide receivers already. Waivers, 10 team. Yeah. So you got good wide receivers already. So I don't know how much of an upgrade you're going to get at the wide receiver position versus those 3 guys. Honestly, even like James Conner, Brian Thomas duo would be sweet for me if I can get those 2 kind of guys together. But yeah, I think we've kind of talked through that. All right. Jamie Kraft went for 21 in one of my redrafts. Yeah, I would have lost. I think that's how I lost to Ben Wasley. So if you're listening to Ben Wasley, he outbid me. So I hear you on that. His touchdown rate, Breece, is elite. He's saying don't trade Breece Hall. I think we kind of agree on that one. You need a little more. Wilson will be a top 5 wide receiver. Grab him now. I like that. Gibbs. All right. Sorry, my bad about the trades. So Aiden, I also traded Gibbs, Mason, and Ayuk for Jefferson, and my league told me I am terrible. So
3 for 1. Yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot.
That is.
You gave a lot. You gave up a lot. That's okay. That's all right. Just stay with us, man. We got you. You know what? From now on, we'll be your think tank. You come with us, Aiden. We'll talk through this stuff. And honestly, you know what? We would have said, hey, that you could have gave it up a little less. Sometimes you got to remember, if you're extremely deep, child team, like 10-team league, and you got really deep benches, and you feel like Jefferson plus your two, top players on your bench is better than Gibbs, Mason, and Ayuk, maybe, but that's very unlikely. So definitely, but we're here for you, man. We'll support you all the way. We'll get you through this. No worries. You're going to win the league anyway.
Probably Gibbs, Ayuk for Jefferson may have gotten that done, and you could have kept Mason.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Obviously, too, the other thing with Mason is the CMC, what is going to happen with him? Are you going to have him for 4 more weeks or 6 more weeks? But all I can tell you is for the next month or so, Mason's going to be an RB1. So, sometimes I think we try to sell too early. And by the way, CMC, the 49ers, if they keep winning games, they might not be in a rush to bring him back. They might keep him out until X amount of time, get him ramped up for the playoffs. And for us, for fantasy purposes, we won't see him until November. So I'm not trading Mason if I can keep my hands on him. Mason and another player for Breece Hall would be an interesting one if you want to do that. Mason, I think, is an awesome pickup there. Andrews got into a bad car accident in August, right? Yeah, so he did get hurt in the offseason. That is a good point. You know what? I don't know. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is they haven't really limited him in the sense of practice, all this stuff, but that could be a reason why he's off to a slow start. So maybe there is a buy low, but I don't know. Just after the first month.
Definitely something not right there.
Yeah, definitely not something. I agree with you. When will Kraft ever be a top 5 dynasty tight end? Right now. I'm telling you, Jamie. Right now. You're excited. I'm excited.
The bar's pretty low for a top 5.
Yeah, right. I mean, everybody's either hurt or not playing well. So yeah, the top 5 tight end landscape is a rough one, folks. With Cooks ruled out for potentially a while, thoughts on Tolbert? So I think when it comes to the Cowboys, when they're at home, I am interested in their other players. When they're on the road, Dak just doesn't play as good, and CeeDee Lamb is a target vacuum. Jake Ferguson's the number 2. So I think Tolbert is someone I'm curious about, and I'm willing to stash, and I'm willing to start him as a streamer wide receiver 3 at home in plus matchups. But that's a very narrow line, narrow starting ability. But what's your thoughts about Tolbert there?
Yeah, I agree. At best, he's going to be the 3rd, maybe the 4th target when you consider the running backs too. So I'm not going to pay a lot to get him, but if you need a wide receiver 3 or a flex, for the bye weeks, he's not a bad option. Maybe not this week, but they've got Detroit at home in week 6.
That's a good one.
That one looks pretty enticing before their
bye.
So if you buy him, you're buying him maybe for next week, not this week, and just kind of see how it plays out. You might be sitting on a gold mine, or at worst you just cut him, on the bye week, and it really is, you're no harm, no foul.
Javier, let's talk about this one. What RB can I target for Swift and Pittman? I can tell you this. My first thought here, Javier, is that you're going to have to look at the roster. Is Pittman going to be an upgrade for a wide receiver 3 flex for another team? Right? Because if you're going to try to poach a better running back, is the other team getting an upgrade with Michael Pittman? So you have to look at your league first and see who's really weak at wide receiver 3 flex, and then say, okay, Pittman will give them an upgrade. All right, so guys that I would like to try to get up to, James Conner types would be great. That might be a little tough to get.
Kenneth Walker, maybe.
Walker's just, I might be just way too in on Walker. Watching him against Detroit, Detroit's elite against the run. I honestly would give up a lot I would give up what Aiden gave up for Jefferson. I'd probably give up for Kenneth Walker right now. I am just all in on Kenneth Walker. So yes, if Walker, I don't think you could get this for Walker. But
yeah, I think right now for Javier, we talked about both of these guys tonight, and this week they both, assuming Joe Flacco's under center for the Colts, they both have plus matchups, and the best case scenario is both of them, who came on finally last week, they have another strong week, and now you're sitting on a lot more value than you are right now. So I would consider holding them both this week and seeing where you are, early next week with both of these guys. And like you said, check your league and see what's out there.
Yeah, I agree with the check the league, see what the deal is first. See if there's somebody out there potentially, because Pittman and Swift are coming off strong games. I'm not just going to make the trade because we just talked about these guys have good matchups, but I'm not risking it with just because they had good weeks last week. It's been 4 weeks through the season. It's 3-1 almost for these guys for good versus bad. But I would say you have to, Javier, take a look at your league, figure out which team has the weakest flex, wide receiver 3, and then come back. I'll be on Friday. You can jump on with us Friday at 5 or do the Sunday live show. We can answer your question, go into deeper dive for that as well. Hayden also talks about trading Hall for Kyron and Singletary. Aiden, I'm not worried about benches just yet. I personally don't want to trade. I like Singletary. He's actually a solid player. We don't have your full roster. I don't know, like after Barkley and Brees, we don't know what your RB3 situation is. So I would definitely say I would play him this week against Minnesota. Hang on to Hall, see how it goes before we start, trying to dump him off a bad week against Denver. So Jamie comes in with a question about Nico Collins for Walker and a second. I think Walker and Nico are the wide receiver shelf life, of course, is so much longer. We get that. But Dynasty, I kind of operate in 3 to 5 year windows at most. I'm not worried about 10 years from now. So honestly, I think Walker and Nico are kind of, it would depend. I know in Dynasty leagues, running backs are much more scarce than wide receivers. I have a Dynasty team where I have Walker and Brian Robinson. And then my RB3, ironically, is Tyrone Tracy, who we're going to talk about in a second. So I think Walker does offer more value. I would say if I'm a competitive team and I think I can win the championship, I'd rather have Walker this year. But Nico is probably the better long-term Dynasty guy. But I think it's too close to add in a second-round pick. If you can get Walker in a second for Nico, I would do it.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of the kicker for me too. If there's a draft pick sweetener and I get Walker, again, depending on my situation and my running or my wide receivers outside of Nico, but yeah, I like that. Walker and an extra draft pick for next year. Yeah, I would take that.
By the way, this is what I love about Jamie too. Just spitting facts. By the way. Your bench doesn't score points. What is this, best ball? Come on, get over yourselves, people. Jamie just laid out facts. I love that every second of that. All right, epic fail. Thoughts on Tyrone Tracy? Saul Singletary not practice with a groin. We're trying to roster, or is it a trap versus Seattle in the case where Neighbors doesn't play with concussion and the offense falls apart? Honestly, playing up in Seattle is going to be a trap. Seattle just beat up on the Dolphins a few weeks ago. Devin Achane didn't look good. I think Tyrone Tracy, by the way, I like Tracy. And listen, Tyrone Tracy has earned work already in this offense. Listen, Singletary is the RB1, but long-term Tyrone Tracy, but this is obviously a redraft question, and if you should start him this week. No, I am not trying to start Tyrone Tracy on the road against Seattle if Singletary's out. But by the way, it's only Wednesday. Practice reports don't matter really until Friday. So honestly, veterans get Wednesdays off all the time. So I wouldn't even stress about it personally, but I like Tyrone Tracy long-term. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, same. You mentioned best ball a minute ago, and Tyrone Tracy was one of my frequent best ball, late round running backs to take a shot on. I like him, and I like the trend that he's moving on, but redraft or, if I'm thinking about a spot start, no, he's not quite there yet, but I do like the trajectory he's on. And, a month from now, 6 weeks from now, we might be talking about him in a different way. But right now, no, he shouldn't be on your radar for a start. Yeah,
I like Tracy, though, a lot. He's a good player. He's actually getting some work in the passing game, which is really good. He's actually kind of trusted at pass pro already. I think the arrow's pointing up on him. I like him in dynasty formats. Just pluck him away. Offer a player that's maybe more win now and just pluck him if you're a team that's kind of looking for the future. I like that call. Jamie, I got Walker McConkey at a second for Nico and Rashad White 2 weeks ago. There you go.
Nice.
All right. I'll tell you my team. Aiden, Jordan Love, Barkley Hall, Jefferson Olave, Kelsey Smith, Lad McConkey, Juwan Jennings, Wicks, Justice Hill. So it does seem like you do have a lot more wide receiver depth here than you do running back depth. So, I guess I could see how trading Hall to get Singletary, but honestly, I think I'm going to keep Hall. I'm keeping Hall for one more week. I mean, Kyron's been really good, by the way. He's only averaging 20 fantasy points a game. So I think that's kind of what we want Breece Hall to average. So I'm not completely poo-pooing this idea, but I just think that I want to see Rodgers and the Jets offense get an opportunity against a better matchup for them. I know the Vikings are good. They are good. But this is the first matchup where he's not facing like a relatively elite defense. So I kind of want to see how Hall does this week. Call me crazy. I'm going to wait a week. Thoughts, Derek?
Yeah, I would as well. I mean, I don't think there's a really rush to make a move here. I mean, you already made the move. We talked about before for Jefferson, but there's not a rush to make a move here because you've got enough, even in a 10 team, you've got enough players on here who you can count on. I mean, they're not all going to go off on the same week. If they do, that's great. But you need a core group that with a few of them that are really going to go off. And you've got enough players here to give you a nice solid base for a team. So I wouldn't rush to try to break that up. Like I say, Hall's going to be fine. And give him a little more time to become what we're, like you said, we're seeing of Kyron Williams right now, and you're gonna feel a lot more comfortable. So I wouldn't rush to trade him.
Javier, last one. Let's see. We got Purdy, Mason, Swift, Pollard, B-Rob, Allen, St. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Pittman, Kupp, Reed. Then he's got Pat and Njoku. Any upgrades you recommend? I mean, the team's pretty solid. I think the only thing I could probably say is like your RB2 is maybe hit or miss.
He's got JT in there as well. Kind of tough.
Oh, JT. Oh, no, that's what I mean. Yeah. So you got JT and Mason for now, but JT's hurt, so we'll see. But honestly, I don't really – the only person I would try to sell is Pittman because I don't love him with Anthony Richardson. And I think if Flacco plays this week and he plays well, I'm going to try to package maybe Pittman and Swift. This is a really good Pittman Swift like you just brought up. Yeah, I could see a Pittman Swift. I guess my other question for Javier would be like, what's your starting lineup? 2 running back, 3 receiver flex?
Yeah. 12 team, 10 team, 12 team.
Yeah, I would say Swift and Pittman for a guy like James Cook would be sweet. A guy like maybe like I brought up Connor a few times, but Connor, James Cook, those type of guys I would like to upgrade to. Maybe Devin Achane. Those kind of guys would be really good. Maybe those low end RB1s that you could get up to for that duo. So that would be my recommendation. But you have to take a look at your other league mates and see what team is got one of those guys and also potentially could use Pittman as a flex. So
yeah, and I would say don't worry so much about tight end because everyone's struggling there. The inclination may be to try to, get a upgraded tight end, but your tight ends are fine as well. I wouldn't really rush to try to make a move there. Wait till Njoku comes back and see what you've got there and decide, later if you need to upgrade tight end.
Yeah, I mean, you can also try to do like a Njoku, Pat Freiermuth plus Pittman to get you an upgraded tight end. I mean, I'm okay getting rid of Pittman here. If you could jump up to like, I mean, the funny thing is there really isn't like an elite tight end right now. Dallas Goedert is good because there's no Brown or Smith. Right. George Kittle's been good because Debo and Ayuk have been kind of in and out, and Ayuk's getting back up to speed. Brock Bowers and Cole Kmet, Jake Ferguson types. Like I'm not going to trade assets to really upgrade there. Kelsey just hasn't been it. Maybe with Rice officially now done for at least a while, that Kelsey will start being ramped up again. But No, I think you're right, Derek. All right, Cam, I love you, man. I really do appreciate you jumping on here, but we're done. We can't do this anymore. I gotta call it quits. It's an hour and a half into the show, but I promise you this, Cam. Come on, I'll be on at 5 o'clock on Friday. We also do a 2-hour Sunday live show. We got you. We do. I think this has been an hour and a half. We got to call it quits. The missus is probably back there wondering where I'm at. She's probably concerned. She's probably called the authorities right now. There's probably a search party out there wondering where I am after an hour and a half. So I have to call it quits. And Derek, too. It's probably like 3 a.m. where Derek is right now.
Feels like it.
Yeah. So make sure you guys follow us across the board at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, IG, and TikTok. And, of course, make sure you jump over to Razzball.com and check out all the great tools and resources you need to win your fantasy league. And make sure you join us this Sunday live, folks. We'll be on for 2 hours. Cam, honestly, if I see you on Sunday live, I'm jumping you to the top because that's how much I want to make it up to you. But, honestly, we got to close out the show. Derek, any final thoughts, where they can find your content? Derek Favret, what do you got?
Yeah, look for my DFS and props article later this week, and looking forward to. I missed last Sunday, so I look forward to being back this Sunday with the fellas, and let's win some fantasy games here.
I love it, man. And follow me at Bobby LaMarco on Twitter, and I'll be tweeting all the latest news and notes for the slot versus wide analysis. And join me this Friday. I'll be on again with Ben Wasley. Thank you for joining us again, folks. We are out of here.